I did promise that it wouldn't be a month-long wait. Hello there, everybody. Saban92 aka Nightmare, and finally, welcome back to Obby Axolotl. Last episode, we finally got to see what was inside that headset, which seemed to be a demo of some sort of game of sorts. It was, interesting to say the least. I'm kind of wondering what it what its relation is with Liam and Aang, which we haven't heard from them in a little while. So, I don't know. However, before we got even a chance to kind of tear it apart or anything like that, the kids threw it into the void. Part of me wants to believe that those babies, they know something. Or maybe they really are just innocent. However, I'm gonna be kind of leaning toward the possibility that there's something not right with them. At least that's kind of what I'm thinking. Now then, Hutsa, Actuary, R&D. These 3 months cover the first half of their calendar. But there are still 2 we haven't talked about yet. The 4th month of each year was called Beautification. Nice. This month was curated by Lana, the axolotl in the tank most concerned with aesthetic. The theme of this month was appreciating the beauty around them, but really it was just an excuse to focus their efforts on decorating. Fair enough. They used this month to make their living space breathable and beautiful, placing new decorations everywhere and tinkering with the bright colors showcased all across the tank. It was a good sister month to R&D, which is all about creating new innovations, using the plants and getting the tank messy with materials for the sake of triumph. At one point, Neo likened it to an art appreciation month, which had slightly displeased Lana. She thought of it more as a way to cultivate their surroundings, to give them peace for the rest of the year. In other words, a clean room is a happy room. By putting in the minimal amount of work during this month, they could look around the tank and breathe a sigh of relief at how neat and organized everything looked. They might not have adored beautification while it was going on, but it was often hard, boring work. But they were always happy they had done it afterward. The 1st to the 3rd of beautification month was the big maintenance period. Systematically, they would go over each of their creations, from the tallest tower to the stadium they built for their role-playing sessions, and fill in the places which had started to decay or were losing leaves. Missing leaves could happen for a few reasons, including age, but the most common cause was the triplets. They got themselves quite an appetite, don't they? During their hour of being awake, zipping from here to there, the triplets would oftentimes fly into structures due to their unbridled puppy-like energy. At first, this had annoyed everyone, and they had attempted to stop this behavior in various ways. But as usual, the triplets didn't listen, and so the adults learned to live with the occasional hole in the wall. Through a hole in the wall. A unique superstition of beautification was that while projects were started and stopped all throughout the year, it was an especially lucky omen for a project to be started during this month. This is because, historically, some of the structures they were almost proud of, such as the huge swimming pool of ground-up plants and the giant roller coaster which lifted them all the way from the bottom of the tank to the top, had all started construction during this month. Aside from the maintenance period, there was one more holiday during this month, a more somber one. Is it dedicated to Liam? Yep. Liam Memorial Day, the 14th of beautification. I think it's very fitting that Liam's Memorial Day is in Lana's month. It was on this day, in the 3rd year, that they had begun creating their calendar in earnest. On this day, they would each go, one by one, to the statue they had erected of Liam during one of the very early years of the tank. Sometimes they would sit above the arm that was buried there. Other times they would focus and try to remember the scant number of conversations they may have had with Liam all those years ago. But regardless, the green axolotl was never forgotten. Not even for 1 year. There were times, several times in fact, where they were embroiled in other activities, such as lengthy role-playing campaigns or working on technological advances. That various other holidays were skipped out of laziness or forgetfulness. But Liam Memorial Day was the most sentimental holiday they made, and even when arguments occurred, as they occasionally did, everyone put aside all differences to remember this day. And it is here that we peer into another short, isolated fragment of time. This was a conversation they had about Ankh. For the first time in a long time, on the 14th of beatification, in the 21st year after they had emerged from the void. Oh boy. 21 AV, Memorial Day. Oftentimes, as the years passed, they would visit the memorial separately, one by one, but occasionally they would head there together. The year 21 was one of those occasional years in which they headed to the statue together. At the time, they were hard at work on a big lift system, one which they prophesied would change the way they moved around the tank forever. The construction had grown exponentially larger for the past few years. The project's grander and more time-consuming. The amount of plans had become cluttered, though, and there were times where it became somewhat of a challenge to go from one corner to another. The lift system would change all of that. It was similar in design to a human ski lift. It would be built on rails, and using perpetual motion would take them leisurely across to their work sites. The project ended up being a giant failure a half year later. But they did not know this at the time. They worked on it tirelessly from dawn till dusk. A holiday soon arrived, a chance for a break, a yearly obligation to remember the old times.
It's beautiful outside, isn't it? I'm sure he'd appreciate today.
Well, you say that every year, but yeah.
I'm sure he would.
There was silence for some time as they contemplated their thoughts. Eventually, Axie spoke up.
Hey guys! This is a little hard to bring up, but, well, I don't want to ruin the good vibes we got going on lately.
Axie, we've noticed something has been off with you for days now.
What is it already? Yeah, come on. We know it's not something that bad.
Right! It's something to do with the memorial, isn't it?
Yeah, so spill it, you big dummy. Alright. There's a name I've been thinking of. A name we haven't talked about too much for a long time now.
You don't mean...
I do. Ankh. I think of him often, too. Especially around this time of the year.
They all sighed in unison. From time to time, Liam's name would get brought up, but they had all consciously avoided saying Ankh's name for a while now. Even when he was more of a distant memory than ever, they had all known that this conversation would happen one day.
You know, it's weird, you guys. Lately I've been having dreams about that time, all those years ago. For a long time, those dreams were scary nightmares, but strangely, somehow over time they've become sort of pleasant. In a way that's hard to describe. I don't know what to think, you guys. It's not like I've forgotten how rotten Ankh was, or what I did to him.
Yeah, I've had a nightmare or two in my time as well, but just like you, over the years, they've mostly stopped. Lana breathed in and out, and looked up at them.
I've also had dreams involving everyone, even Ankh. They're not bad dreams either. I should hate him with every ounce of my body. He called me terrible names, threatened me, and even injured me. He was only around for a very short part of our lives. And yet, I can't forget him. I can't bring myself to hate him either, even though I know what he did was so bad it should have been unforgivable.
Oh, why don't we talk about him? Honestly, say whatever is on our minds regarding Ank and Liam. Oh, it's playing the title theme, I think, or a different version of it. And so they talked. For a long time that day they talked, well into the dead of night. They talked about what happened years ago. They talked about their memories of the days where they had to deal with Ank violently, and how it made them all feel. It was refreshing to finally let out some of the anxieties they had been keeping locked up for what felt like forever. Oh, if only Ank had played nice with us. He proved that he couldn't coexist with us twice.
Even people like him, my heart says he must have had a point of view that made sense to him.
Yeah, and I want to know what the hell I want to know the history between Ank and Liam. I need to know I need answers.
Maybe he wasn't the bad guy in his own mind. As stupid as that sounds. But maybe not. Some people are rotten to the core. Regardless, it's not healthy for us to hold hatred in our hearts for so long.
Periodically, Neo would glance over at the void, as if talking about Ank would make the void suddenly remember to spit him out.
All these memories. I'm starting to remember things about Liam I haven't thought of in ages, too. Happy thoughts are flooding back. And it's nice. It's nice to revisit a part of yourself you haven't hung out with in a while. Oh, I agree. I feel bad about what happened between us, but ultimately, I don't regret my decision. Even when I lost my head back then to rage, I was just trying to protect you, Lana. Oh, I know that, Axie. I've known that for years, maybe even since the very start. And I'm sorry with how I scorned you back then. Oh, it's okay, Lana. It wasn't a black and white situation by any means. And, well, I'd like to think that if the same thing happened again, I'd be able to control my temper. You know, in those days of my youth, I was really quite obsessed with you. Well, who wouldn't be? Maybe I was even a little too obsessed with you back then, but it felt natural for whatever reason. For that, I'm sorry. Don't worry about it, Axie. You don't even need to apologize for something so far in the past. I still love the heck out of you no matter what. Oh, I love you too. Just not in the weird, obsessed way, like when I was a kid. Looks like we've gone over quite a few obsessions. All of us. Strangely, that's good. I mean, no, not strangely at all, that's actually quite good. Over the past 2 decades, their relationships were fortified and they grew closer as a family. To Axie, each of them was unforgettable, irreplaceable people who had even become part of his own identity. He realized as the years went on. With Lana, it was a deeper bond than Axie could have ever hoped for, a bond only a very close brother and sister might share. He felt an extremely similar feeling with Neo as well. Neo was someone he could trust with his life, no questions asked. Well, seeing how you guys have become my family, well, I know it would have happened with Liam too if he was still here with us. Aww. I remember thinking, hoping, even back then. I wish it could have happened with Ank too. And hey, maybe when the triplets learn how to talk, still crossing my fingers that they're late bloomers, I bet we can become just as close. We know we aren't gonna forget Liam, but I don't want to forget Ank either. I don't even think I could forget the old galoot. Oh, I can see him I can see his faded portrait over there. I see it. Oh, if anything, he's a lesson to be learned. A way to educate the kids on what not to do. I'm right behind you, you assholes. You are correct. History is a gift to us from those in the past, so we may learn from their actions. I've got an idea. but I almost feel bad for saying it aloud. I'm gonna say it anyway. What if we renamed Liam Memorial Day to just Memorial Day? Liam's memorial stays up, of course, and he remains the focus. The symbolic mascot of the day, if you will. But instead of just him, we could use this holiday to celebrate everyone who has left this tank. And all those who might leave it in the future.
The other two were briefly dumbfounded. Time was relative. Even though there had been numerous calendar changes in the past, in the year 21, things have been stable for a while now.
Liam is still the focus, but maybe once in a while we could go to Ank's corner and pay his remains a visit. We still need to hope that turns out to be good. Oh, I'm fine with that, Lana. We've been avoiding that spot for far too long.
I like it too. A splendid idea! And so it was that from that day onwards, Liam Memorial Day was changed to simply Memorial Day. With this anecdote out of the way, our tale begins to accelerate once again. Alrighty. Intermission 3. Oh, goody. Interesting music. We've covered 4 months so far. That's actuary R&D and beautification. That leaves 1 more month on our 5-month calendar not yet talked about. There isn't a proper way to give a complete title to this month. Upon conception of the calendar, its name was originally Kids Month. But eventually, the name of the month was changed to GOTS. GOTS? This name change was to be temporary, of course. Just as holidays were removed, refined, and rewritten, so was this month, and its theme. The original idea of Kids Month was to dedicate the month to the next generation. That is to say, the triplets. They had hoped that as the kids got older, the month would become associated with the values of family, thanks, and giving. But after 20 years or so, it was apparent that the kids weren't growing up as much as they would have liked. They looked and acted the same as they did the day that they arrived in the tank. While time was always moving forward, everyone's biological state in the tank remained unchanged. With a few special occasions as exceptions, the kids would only be up for that single hour each day, swimming wildly around the tank, eating grass, and then sleeping yet again. They did not need to be taken care of in any way, and indeed the adults could go weeks without seeing them if they happened to be busy. A lot of the time, most of the time even, it was like the triplets weren't even there. But even though Kids Month was temporarily changed to GOTS, they never forgot to celebrate Kids Day from year 3 onwards. Kids Day took place on the 18th of month 5, on the anniversary when those 3 emerged from the void. While throughout the year the adults would visit them periodically, on Kids Day they would spend every single second of the hour they could with the triplets. This meant running around the tank at high, exhausting speeds, and attempting to keep up with the unexpected turns or abrupt plant-eating sessions that the triplets were prone to. Over the years, they tried many other ways of getting the kids' attention, of course. They tried holding a surprise party around one of the spots they frequented. Triplets ran through this completely. They tried gently touching the kids with their hands, as if the touch would allow them to bond with each other. They backed away when another axolotl touched their clammy cold skin. On one occasion, Axie attempted to physically tackle one of the triplets so they would stay still. It was a form of play wrestling, but the triplets seemed angry afterwards. They did not like being touched. Their bodies were jelly-like, squishy. Unlike the adults who had hardened forms. Even while they were sleeping, for those long stretches of the day, if any of the 3 adults tried touching the babies, they would immediately begin squirming in their sleep and break free. It was better to leave them be. The last thing they wanted to do was make the babies uncomfortable, after all. Rira, and Lee definitely knew when the adults were there, acknowledged their presence with their actions and grunts, but they didn't seem to care one way or another whether they saw them or not. Instead of children of the same race, the babies felt more like pets. pets who merely tolerated their owner. Okay, so like cats. Not the loyal friend type. They seemed happy enough swimming around the tank, eating their plants, dreaming their long dreams, and exercising intensely during their hour awake. The kids seemed less a major part of Axie, Lana, and Neo's lives than they originally promised to be. And so after a great number of years, Kids Month didn't seem appropriate for the name of the month. But what was something they did on the 5th month without fail? They read their favorite story together and talked about it. They ended up always reading Everything, My Discovery of the Ryukosho during this month. That was the story you may recall of Dr. Guts, a professor of archaeology. That's why. And his findings of an ancient tribe who worshipped a god known as Everything. As described before, the book took a disturbing turn in the second half, with all sorts of strange imagery, visions, and mishaps, as the god known as the Ryukosho wreaked havoc on his life. It was a book open-ended enough to encourage speculation of what actually happened. It was also the book where Neo had found one of the notes from RB, and over time Lana warmed up to the idea that this was fascinating. There were other books they read from the original days, a few that were action-oriented, a few escapist series, even some sci-fi, and nearly half a dozen detective stories. But none had the same allure as the Ryukosho book. Over time, the story just ended up being something they did once a year, even though it had once spooked Axie. The sea of glowing hieroglyphics in the cave Dr. Guts found, the nightmares, the mutilation. But what was most fascinating of all was that it had no conclusion. Was the entity haunting Dr. Guts, known as the Ryukosho, all in his mind? It felt like there were layers of mystery there. And after each reading, they would engage in theory talks and discussions. Perhaps some of the visions were symbolic. Perhaps some were nonsense. The end of the story implied that Dr. Guts was erased from all existence by this entity, the Ryukosho. While the vast majority of the story was told in a journal format, the very end was a faculty list during one of the years Dr. Guts taught, with his name strangely absent. Debates on the meaning of the story raged on for years. Lana said that if they really erased him, every action he made since childhood, every reaction he had put into the world, and every student he taught, and that was too sad. Even though Dr. Guts was likely a fictional character, even though he was painted as somewhat of a jerk to his students and colleagues, they couldn't help but feel sorry for him. So they named their last month after him. Maybe he was forgotten in the story, but he wasn't forgotten to them. And besides, the name change was going to be temporary, just until the kids got older. It was an annual thing, to read this story on the 23rd each year, that they eventually named the day Everything Day. So, even if they changed the month, they would never change the day. And at some point they thought it would be fun to incorporate the Judeo-Christian tradition of giving gifts to each other, which they would do before reading the story each holiday. Oh. The last and final holiday of the year was Void's Day Eve, which took place on the last day of the year, the 30th of Guts. There's not much to talk about with this holiday. It was an excuse to hold a massive party with dancing, tricks, and all sorts of other events that went on tirelessly into the night. And the following evening on Void Day, the first of Hutsa, they would hold a nice dinner to start off the next year on a good note. I see. With that, you now know, more or less, the calendar that the Axolotls followed their whole lives. There were some minor revisions here and there, even some holidays and traditions that we haven't talked about that they tested out, but never stuck. But for the most part, these were the 5 months which dictated their lives. Although, there were some periods of time, some lasting even a year or more, where the calendar didn't seem to matter at all. Special occasions such as Memorial Day, Everything Day, and Void Day were often kept. Some of the other, less important holidays were not celebrated. So, what were they doing that was so important that they chose to ignore most of their own calendar? The answer is special, long-form games that they immerse themselves into completely. These long stretches of time were among their favorite pastimes at the height of the Golden Age. Many of these pastimes were role-playing campaigns, which they created an entire universe for, complete with set pieces to go along with them. Some of the campaigns they played only lasted a few months, but a couple were so grand, they lasted multiple years. They created imaginary cities and armies, and would role-play their respective characters growing up, training, getting married in some cases, getting older, and eventually dying. These campaigns, the three Axolotls indulged and made their time in the tank feel longer than it did. They lived as their characters for nigh a century. And sometimes, it felt like they had lived multiple lives as multiple identities. They went on quests. They formed all sorts of relationships, good and evil. They created armies to battle one another. Made their imaginary universe have biomes, ranging from steampunk to sci-fi to modern city life, I had a stroke, to fantasy. Sometimes they based these long games on real-life properties, the sort of stuff they read to each other during the night. But other times, the worlds would be entirely created by them respectively. They lived and breathed as these characters during the height of their enjoyment, going to sleep in their imaginations and role-playing as they woke up throughout the day. Sometimes, after a particularly good campaign, they would sleep together, huddled up in a handmade blanket, while Neo told them fables he made up. That's adorable. The stories were sometimes realistic, sometimes fantastical in nature. Some were about far-off lands made of clouds. Others were about a man named Mark and all his goofy adventures. Ah! A few were spooky, and others were political in nature. Some stories lasted one evening, and others epics lasted a year, being told each night, for days on end. Stories of every genre, every shape, and every existence. Londa and Axie lived for those tales, considered them the most entertaining and brightest parts of their days. Soon enough, the two of them made their own stories, being written on the seemingly endless supply of paper that Neo owned. They would go from one to another, Lana to Axie to Neo, and regale each other well into the dead of night. Each of them loved this, adored this. The two who were not the tellers at any given time would theorize and talk during the day about where they thought the story was headed. It was in this way, through stories and innovations, holidays and the role-playing campaign, that they made their way through eternity. Axie, Neo, and Lana all lived long, fruitful lives together. They swam, they danced, they played, they built, they enjoyed each other's warmth and company. They went on adventures in the tank, which had once been so devoid that they threatened to call it boring. They built things to utilize the small space to its fullest potential. But even if it felt like it at the time, nothing is forever. Even if a stretch of life feels endless, everything is finite, and everything must eventually end. Something had been building up a long time, and in the year 44 AV it finally exploded, along with the rest of the tank. The first murmurs of them realizing something was going awry happened in the year 33 AV, on the 4th of R&D month. Oh. They're starting to realize that something's not quite right if they're the first murmurs of their demise. It wasn't some catastrophic event that first spelled out their demise. The first time they talked seriously about the end of their lives came from a calm observation. It was during this part of R&D month in the 33rd year, after they emerged from the void, that Neo was putting the final touches on his invention for Innovation Day. Most months he spent away from the lab, either sleeping in another corner after construction was done for the day, or in a long, engrossing role-playing campaign. It felt nice, on occasion, to be back in the old lab, nearly unchanged by time, to work on a scientific project. Working and toiling on this average day. Heard a knock on the door. Hold on, let me just put a cover on this. No peeking. Okay, come in. Oh, Lana. What's up?
Hey, Neo. Oh, not too much. Okay, well, okay, that's a lie. Hey, this might seem pretty random, but there's something I wanted to ask you about. Have you noticed anything odd about the tank lately? Anything that's never happened in the entire time we've been living here?
Oh, what do you mean? Well, I'm guessing by the tone of your voice, you're not talking about the stadium pillars that the kids ran through yesterday, huh? Hey, the tank has been feeling a little cold to me lately. Maybe we'll finally start to finally have seasons. I mean, we've been living here for ages now, and there hasn't been a single wind of winter. How nuts is that?
I'm serious, Neo. Why don't you come with me and I'll show you what I'm talking about?
The way Lana looked today, her expression this morning, was especially troubling. It was an expression Neo hadn't seen in quite some time. But whatever was happening, Lana did not present herself as though this were a dire state of emergency. Does have me worried. Whoa. The hell is that? Is it the ludicrous growths? I'm assuming? I mean, I can gander a guess that maybe, I don't know, maybe it's the fact that the stuff is growing a bit too rapidly and they're running out of room? I don't know. She led him to a patch of land that he was very familiar with. They'd harvested plants from this spot 1,000 times at the very least. But upon viewing the spot today, Neo thought he was imagining things. A piece of his tongue got caught in his throat, and he coughed lightly.
See?
Yes. If this is true, then that certainly is odd. Or has it stopped growing? The outer perimeter of this spot, where plants had been growing wildly for as long as they could remember, the area was starting to recede, ever so slightly. It was hard to tell for those who might not have been as intimately acquainted with this patch as they were. But there were less plants growing here than ever before. That was a fact. Well, something like this. I'm not sure I ever expected it to really happen. I suppose I was wrong. The plants are not endlessly renewable after all. But they have lasted a vast amount of time though, haven't they? Well, for that I'm very grateful. I suppose it's possible that one day they may all disappear if this small dry patch is any indication.
Yeah. I came to the same conclusion. Don't hate me, Neo, but it took me a few days to come and see you about this.
Huh? Why?
I didn't know how you'd react. It's been so long, so tremendously long, since we've had any form of change. I've just been nervous about reopening old wounds.
I'm not mad at all. After all this time, you know you can come to me with whatever you want to talk about, right?
Oh, I know.
So, what do you think about this? Well, the only ones that have actually been eating a lot of the plants is the kids. What's gonna happen if they eventually run out of the food? They're gonna have to eat some. Oh, I hope that's not the direction that it's going with.
Well, I've been giving it a lot of thought, actually. And, well, things are gonna be a lot less fun in here without new materials to work with, aren't they?
Oh, right, that too. That is true. I said this before, but the plant's versatility is what transformed this place into a paradise for me.
Me too. We've had a lot of fun over the years, haven't we?
No, I've had a miserable time. 0 out of 10 would not recommend.
Oh yeah, miserable, huh? Alright, Neo. I'm gonna ask you a question. And I want your honest, unfiltered opinion on the matter. What do you think would happen if we went into the void?
Oh! They'd lived here for decades together, yes. They talked about everything under the sun. Almost everything. But this was a sensitive topic, not brought up much because of the implication it held. Well, there's a couple of different possibilities. The first, the one which I felt in my gut not so long ago, was that we'd ceased to exist. That's the simplest explanation. But with what happened to our friends 50 years ago, and those messages, perhaps that is not the case. Of course, we know that Axolotl does not die from merely being sent into the void. But that last message, damn near stamped into my skull. If you want to die, you want your soul to be erased and your mind ripped apart from the seams, step into the void. It'll kill those of you who are not chosen. Who knows if this RB person is even still alive, though? It might be that he died a long time ago. Maybe there's someone else outside the void now. We still have no idea how this world of ours works. Not really. And if that message is true, that we'll die if we step through it, well, I guess we'd be tempting fate, wouldn't we? So maybe we run into RB. Maybe we don't. It certainly would be an adventure, though, wouldn't it?
It would. It might be wishful thinking. But what if we could find out the truth about everything once and for all? For a long time, I just wanted to live a peaceful life with you guys. And we did. And it was wonderful. But those age-old questions, the ones you've been talking about since the very start, I've grown curiouser and curiouser over the years. What if we could find out the truth of those old secrets?
Well, you know me. That would be a dream come true. So tell me, Lana, what's with the question? Really?
Just a thought, that's all.
Really? Is that your just a thought face? Are you forgetting what you said to me just a moment ago?
Okay. You know what I'm thinking then? You know what I'm about to ask.
Looked at her carefully. Then he smiled. I'm ready whenever you are. We've lived long, fulfilling lives. I've done everything I've ever wanted to do. Created most of the things I wanted to create in here. Ages ago, I would have been frightened beyond my wits to enter the void myself. But now I'm ready. I'm ready for the next adventure, as long as you're with me. Whatever that may be beyond the curtain. The stress left her face completely now. She now understood that Neo was on the same page as her.
Well, it's not like it hasn't been absolutely wonderful living here with you and Axie for so long. But like you said, I feel very fulfilled. With everything. Although, we don't have to leave right now, right?
Oh, of course not. We could have a whole 5-year going away party, and I suspect we shall. And besides, we should run this by Axie first.
Wanna go now? The least we can do is tell him that the grass is starting to dry up.
Let's go. Oh boy. I wonder how his reaction's gonna be. Axie was in his old corner, doing his own planning for the holiday in a modest house he had built for himself many years back. Knock, knock.
I know it's season for work, but we've come to pay you a visit. There's something that we'd like to talk about. Ah, sup, fools? Thought you guys would be busy with the holiday so close and all. What gives?
Let's ruin the happiness. They led him to the patch of grass and showed him the discovery they'd made.
And so, I don't know. It feels like we should at least consider that option. Really? The void? You'd give up all of this, our perfect lives together, just to jump inside the void? Are you nuts?
Chill, man. It was just an idea. And besides, it doesn't have to be anytime soon.
Have you forgotten? I've been in the void.
It's not somewhere you want to go. Yeah, he experienced it. The void is one of those things I'm likely never to forget. I still wake up in a sweat thinking about it sometimes. It's that awful. My mind instinctively screams no whenever the void is brought up. I think I understand what you're talking about, Axie. I still haven't forgotten the feeling of it either. All those times I got close to it. I could feel myself slipping away too. But in the worst case scenario, is slipping away so bad? After the long, wonderful life we've lived? And we're not talking about doing anything rash anytime soon. We know from what happened that the void isn't the end of all life forever. Perhaps it won't be the end for us either. Maybe it's a little like that roller coaster we built 20 years ago. You were so scared to go on at first, but once you did, you had a great time and couldn't stop. I don't know. I pondered it over and over, on and off throughout the years, and it feels like the void might be the inevitable conclusion to our lives here. I don't think it's the end, though. Don't let your heads get too big now, but I like you guys too much for this to truly be the end of us. There are other places I want to experience before I die. I'd like the tank to be a wonderful long chapter in our lives, but not the whole thing. Lana, you agree with him, don't you? That we should consider going in there?
More or less, yeah. Like Neo said, things don't have to end now. We can end things on our terms.
Also, technically, you three would be together during this whole thing. Maybe that can help you guys keep yourselves together if you actually go in there.
I can't guarantee anything about what happens when we step foot in there, but I doubt it's the end. We're just going on a new adventure. It's a gamble, I guess.
And I've never been one for gambling. Are you forgetting that poker game in 26 where you bet your own coin on a bluff and lost? Axie had a furious face on.
Of course, neither of us would make you come with us if we decided to go. That being said, I don't know. It would feel so odd if we did something that major without you by our side. We're all one big family, Axie.
I agree with Lana. It would be weird, but neither of us would want to make you do something you didn't want to do.
The triplets? Well, we've never had to take care of them even once. Although with the plants disappearing, their food source is being drained. I wonder, though, if they really even need the food to live. The three of us can eat plant-made food as well, and lots of it too. But we don't need it for sustenance.
I doubt we can drag the three of them into the void with us, even if we had to. We've tried to get a hold of them before, and it's never worked out. They're definitely struggling to get free, and it wouldn't be pretty. So you would be content with leaving them here alone forever and ever?
Axie?
No, Axie. I'm sure we'll come up with something. What's up, dude? Talk to us, alright? I'm just not ready, alright? I'm not ready to go in. And I'm certainly not ready to be alone either. Does it have to be this way? Certainly not right now. Look, there's still plenty of plants, and from now on we'll be really careful about how we use them. But we can't stop the triplets from eating. In a couple of years, when the tank is more devoid than it is now, maybe then I'll go into the void. I won't force you to go, but I hope you'll be able to make peace with my decision by then. Sorry about this, Axie. If, when the time comes, the void is a sliding door, then certainly I'll come back.
We'll bring food for the kids, too. We've got to do something, after all.
You can't go in, Lana. Not sure if I'll ever be able to accept that. Glanced at Lana, then huffed away. He can't just make your choice for you.
I know. This sucks, doesn't it? It's been so long since there's been a rift between us. Shh.
Ooh. Once upon a time, Axie may like the void, may have even found it pretty. But the longer he stayed in the tank, the more he grew to despise it. It was the one thing that could tear away his precious life, his precious Lana, his precious Neo, his home. Whenever he was feeling down or angry or sad or annoyed, his thoughts always turned to the void. The day when Neo made him enter it, so many years ago when he was young, he replayed over and over in his mind. Going into the void would result in nothing but a scary death. He wouldn't allow his wonderful friends to die that way, no matter what. The void was evil. Even the holidays he had once enjoyed, the ones which focused on the void, had become unsettling to him. He wished the void would just go away, once and for all. Then there would be no way to leave the tank. Lana and Neo, on the other hand, began talking things over in earnest. In that time, they developed a new sense of kinship that was only between the two of them. They talked vividly about the day that life in the tank would change again. They talked not of death, but of adventures to come. But nobody wanted to disturb the peace of the heaven they had created. The heaven that was only possible because the three of them had forged it together. The heaven that was slowly starting to feel like hell. Hell, when it seemed, well, to be fair, they seemingly have like an eternity, and it's almost like they've exhausted almost everything that they can do, especially with the plants slowly dying away and their resources are dwindling. Oh, pixelation. A few more years passed by. Although there wasn't a conflict between the three of them on the surface, the days didn't feel the same as they once had. In their last few years in the tank, time itself felt like it moved by much slower than the years when they were enjoying life. There was a blanket of anxiety over nearly everything they did. They celebrated the holidays in the months of Hatsa, Actuary, R&D, Beautification, and GOTS normally, all without fail, on the surface. But the difference between these time periods was stark. No matter how much they tried forcing it, the events were never as jovial and full of wonder as before. The magic of the golden age had come and gone, and all they were doing now was grasping for the little bit of pixie dust left behind. There was a cloud hanging over them, even as they did the most mundane activities together. Every word they spoke, every fun conversation they had, every game they played, and every invention they worked on together was now polluted by that intangible tension. It wasn't as though Neo and Lana loved Axie any less. They just wanted him to understand their feelings. They wanted him to accept their decision to move on and seek out somewhere new. They were growing weary of the same life. The plants too began to wither up as Neo had predicted. Even the new rationing system they came up with couldn't stop the plants from drying up. And their bodies, they were starting to break down too. Not from old age, but from something even worse. The uncertain dread loomed and festered over the tank for a few years. And slowly but surely they began lacking in plants to do maintenance on the structures they had already created. Their supply of plants to work with was peanuts compared to what it had once been. And as a result, the projects which had before been so intensive dwindled in complexity as well. Eventually, Innovation Day was cancelled as a whole. It felt like the tank was somehow losing its life. And the two, who were willing to move on to the next stage of their existence, realized that fact separately. If not for their love of Axie, they would have made a move much sooner than they did. Neo and Lana got together several nights, talking for hours optimistically about their futures. Sometimes they felt guilty, as if by having these meetings they were somehow betraying their friend. But the grander picture had been stretched too thin. They reassured one another that there must be better times ahead.
You know, it's not like life is so much worse than before, but things have changed. I don't fall asleep content anymore. I don't wake up with a smile on my face, ready to make the most of the day, and it's not something I can just wish away either. I know what you mean. Things feel sort of dismal these days. It feels like lately when we all hang out, all I'm doing the whole time is forcing myself to act happy. I feel more like a crappy actor than an axolotl these days. It's not even just the lack of plants or the tension between us that's bothering me, either. I've been getting these awful headaches, too.
Headaches, huh?
Yeah, for a while now. I thought they'd just go away on their own, but they've been getting worse.
Neil felt a shiver down his spine. In all the time they'd been here together, headaches had never been a normal thing. And he too felt like his body hadn't been acting optimally for some time lately. Oh. Are their bodies breaking down, and are they going to... If they stay here any longer, there might be a possibility that they might end up similar to Liam's condition. He tried to ignore it like she had, blame it on stress or whatever, but if Lana was feeling something too...
Now that you mention it, I've been feeling kinda dizzy these days too. Exhausted, maybe. The old nightmares I used to have, they've returned too. Due to that, I'm waking up in pain these past few months. It feels like I haven't gotten a good rest in some time. You haven't been sleeping well? Neo? I haven't been sleeping so great either, actually. It feels like no matter how much rest I get, I wake up feeling like crap. It's never been like this before. Well, let's do what we've done with every other problem we've ever experienced in the tank. Analyze things objectively and come up with a solution. We've all slept in different places in the tank over the years. Do you happen to have a specific area where you sleep better? Honestly? The big bed in my corner is where I sleep best. But only when we all sleep in there together as a family. I always wake up really refreshed whenever we spend a night there together. I was hoping you'd say that because I feel the same way. Something about that place is so peaceful. It's been a while since we've all cuddled together and slept, huh? Nearly half a decade, if my count is right. Yeah, I've missed it.
It had once been a normal occurrence, but sleeping in this bed together had become somewhat of a special tradition. When they'd sleep together there, or when they'd slept together there, it was always after naturally passing out at the end of a particularly memorable day, such as the ending of one of their long role-playing campaigns. Without them even realizing it until now, the bed had been a part of their most wholesome moments. The three axolotls cuddled and fell asleep together there several times over the years, but it had always been the three of them.
Wanna try taking a nap? I guess. But, it might be weird doing this without Axie. Yeah. And again, these days it might be weirder to do this with him. He's sure kept to his own lately, huh? Probably not too much fun without plants to work with.
Yeah, I hope he's doing okay. But here's the problem. What if he comes in on you sleeping in the bed together without him? He would feel left out.
It's not like I don't love him, but... No, you don't have to say it. I understand. I still love him too. So what are we waiting for? Let's try to distress and get some good sleep for once. Chill out and start things over with a refreshed mind once we wake up. Doesn't that sound nice? Don't sound too caring now. You don't want to steal my style.
He smiled. They felt each other's warmth, closed their eyes. But after 2 hours of lying there, Lana spoke up.
Nothing, huh? Nope. I'm wide awake too. I've been thinking. Maybe the headaches I have aren't coming from the stress, or the lack of sleep specifically. Is it just me, or has the water felt kind of heavy lately? The water?
I haven't really been paying attention. Because he hadn't consciously realized it, Neo didn't know until now. He decided to swim forward, and in that moment, he could feel a pinch of exhaustion strike him, right at his core. It was weird. He'd been feeling odd, surely, but this amount of exhaustion was unreal. Was his body starting to lose strength? He felt sick all over. There was nothing he wanted to do more than lay down again. In fact, it felt like his body was begging him to do so. You're correct. The water, the air, the atmosphere. Something feels heavy. This isn't right. I've been in here too damn long, and I know this body too damn well.
I think it might be time to talk to him.
Yet as they turned around, they saw Axie was already there. Whoa! Where the hell did his color go?
Sleeping? Oh, hey, Axie! Neo and I weren't feeling so well, so we tried getting some sleep.
I see.
So, Axie, we were wondering, how do you feel today? Right now.
How do I feel? What do you mean?
Well, a moment ago, Neo and I were, talking about how we hadn't been feeling so great lately.
I feel fine. Are you sure? Yep. It's just another day and I feel just fine. But he wasn't normal. They could see that. His skin, which was always vibrant and full of color, looked off and dull today. They knew something terrible was going on, even if Axie himself had been trying his best to ignore it.
You might be fine, but Neo and I have been experiencing some very odd sensations lately. It's like we want to do things, but can't. We're extremely tired, but no matter how much sleep we get, we still wake up exhausted. It feels like a weight is being slowly lifted onto my chest. And I have no idea how it even got there in the first place.
Yeah. For me, it's like 60 years of aging all hit at once. But if we were aging, we'd have a different appearance, I think. I don't want to feel old and weary.
There's a fog around us. You might not be able to see it yet, but it's there all the same.
Alright, let's say just for the sake of posterity that I believe ya. About this fog or whatever. What would cause a fog to suddenly form? We've been living in the tank for ages now. Ages and ages. What could have changed now? Nothing. Nothing has changed. Y'all are overreacting. Whatever might be happening to you guys, it's just a small bump. I'm sure everything will just go back to normal soon.
I don't think it's that simple. We can't just whisk away this weight on our chests. I think it's starting to make us really sick. You remember, Liam, don't you?
Yeah. But Liam was the only one sick, not us. What you just said a second ago. There has been a change in the tank. Follow me. Whoa. Just as he thought, just as he feared, the piece of floor was drying up completely, and the plants were withering away with it. There were only remnants of what had bloomed there before. I'm starting to see a correlation. This is only an idea, but maybe all this time the plants have been keeping us alive. It seemed like a likely explanation to Lana, too. Actually, she had thought the same thing many times in the past.
Could the plants have been cleaning the water in the tank? Is the whole reason we're alive in the first place because of these wonderful plants?
I see. Now the plants, our filter is dying out. And along with them, so are we. Axie stepped up. Huh. If this theory of yours really is true, then how do you explain that? He gestured towards the direction of the void. It was the single hour of the day where the triplets were awake. They zigzagged and weaved through the buildings, swimming erratically at top speed. Why aren't they being affected by this so-called lack of energy? This weight or brain fog or whatever? Well, who knows? There could be a lot of reasons. They might not be affected because they're young. It could be because they eat the plants on a regular basis. Even if we're all axolotls, the triplets have always been a very different sort than us. They don't have the same needs as us. And they live a very different life from us.
Maybe if we make the kids stop eating the plants, then they might grow back. You ever think of that?
I can't say for sure, but I don't think that'll work either. The triplets have already proven they're too fast for us to control. And besides, we don't know if they need those plants to live or not.
This patch may be drying up, and we may be experiencing some terrible symptoms. But there are still enough plants in the tank for them, at least, to live on for a very long time.
Look, just give us some time, you guys. Things will go back to normal somehow, I'm sure. They always have. Just don't do anything weird, alright? Axie swam off and left them all alone. With that, the gap between the three of them widened even more. The days which had once been so precious now became dreadful to get through. Lana and Neo felt hopeless. They loved Axie too much to do anything. So for a while they pushed themselves. For the next 3 months, they pushed themselves out of bed and tried to attend to their regular activities. But at night, they suffered silently. They held on for his sake. Leaving the tank didn't seem right without being on good terms with Axie. And while he frequently kept to himself in the last few months, at least he seemed to be doing okay. They, on the other hand, were having the worst time of their entire lives. Their bodies began to get weaker each day. They would swim less, talking less. Insomnia was horrifying. Even though they hadn't ever eaten, their stomachs began to rumble and weigh down on them, and their throats began to hurt in kind. Minds, their thoughts, their ideas, their communication skills, which they had taken for granted, all began to fade as well. Construction? That was completely out of the question. Swimming itself soon became a luxury. Some days they could only make it a couple of feet away. Other days they couldn't leave at all. Axie avoided them on those dead days. More and more they sat hunched over inside the lab, unable to move, unable to think correctly. They started to shiver. The water wasn't always this cold, was it? With their throats hurting, their backs and stomachs aching, they could only imagine someone was trying to choke them, slowly, allowing them just enough air to live, but not enough for any quality of life. Then started the hallucinations. They imagined someone was watching them. It's just like Liam! They attempted to comfort each other, but even that didn't work. One day they stared at each other, each realizing that they didn't have the strength to speak. But for most of the days, most of the time, they were lucid enough to talk. In hushed whispers, when they had the strength to communicate, they decided upon a plan. The day of the plan approached quickly.
I think it's time.
Days have been agonizingly slow lately. They were even starting to lose perspective on how great the Golden Age truly was. But, Axie, we haven't decided what we should do. Do we drag him in there with us?
Even if he doesn't realize it, soon enough he'll be just as sick as we are. But if he really doesn't want to come, we'll just have to find a solution from inside the void and bring it back to him.
Hey, one more question, Lana, while I have the energy. It's about that feeling that we're being watched. Do you still feel it too?
Yeah, a little. But it's got to be a delusion.
Neo felt like the weaker he got, more likely it was that a bloodthirsty eye would pounce out of nowhere and take him. Something like that in the tank the whole time, and they had never noticed? That just wasn't possible.
Time to act is now. I'd rather take my chances jumping into the void than deal with another second of this.
If we die, then we'll die. But I want to live. I'll fight as hard as I can for that chance. I've been thinking a lot about Liam lately, too. Is what we're experiencing similar to what happened to him all those years ago?
Maybe. I miss him more than ever. And the suffering he went through probably makes ours look like kittens on a rainy day.
It's not fair to compare suffering, remember? Man, he'd have loved everything we made in this tank. All the buildings, the amusement centers, the inventions.
I was scared of forgetting about him in the past. Those two, Liam and Hank, they're unforgettable.
So is that other character, even if I've never seen his face. The one who calls himself Abby.
The one who promised to take you home, huh? The tank was my home, but I'd like a new home now.
Gather up your strength. Our last swim is close.
It was finally time to enter the void. They were well aware that they were dying. They would risk their last remaining moments on the gamble of a lifetime. They were able to enter through the void freely. They would come back to help Axie and the triplets. The lack of clean water wasn't prejudiced. Eventually, it would get them too. Before everyone succumbed to the sickness, they needed to help them. They would save everyone. That was their hope anyway. That right there is literally the perfect place to end this. Don't worry, we're going to be picking this up next week, so don't worry, you won't be waiting long. Okay, everything started turning dismal, and it looks like we have been left with no choice but to have them go into the void. Axie has suddenly started acting strange. His color has dulled out. He's no longer as happy as he was. And the quality of life in the tank has just... it's gone down the drain, quite literally. So, it seems like the plants, there's a possibility that the plants really were acting as a sort of filter that kept everybody safe and alive. But now I'm worried about Neo and Lana. What's going to happen to them? And what's going to happen to Axie when he's left behind? I don't know. I'll have to find out next week then, won't I? Thank you all very much for watching, and if you all like this, be sure to let me know, and I will definitely see all of you guys in the next video.